For epilepsy, there is hope. Hey podcast listeners, Tori Robinson here for Epilepsy Sparks Insights, a podcast about epilepsy, epilepsy research, common comorbidities, and all of the fascinating science behind it. Whether you have epilepsy, are a family member, a neurologist, neuropsychiatrist, therapist, neurophysiologist, scientist, or researcher, Epilepsy Sparks Insights is designed to help you learn more about epilepsy from the other side of the table. I'm a person with epilepsy and some missing brain tissue. I hope to help bridge the unnecessary gap between patients, the public, and the aforementioned, because epilepsy research and science are cool. Last week, we spoke with Javier Ceballos, an advanced nursing practitioner in epilepsy candidate at Beaumont Hospital, Dublin, telling us about the invaluable, crucial role that he plays in the care and quality of life for those affected by epilepsy in Ireland. Today, we are talking to Christin Godale, a neuroscience Ph.D. candidate at the University of Cincinnati, Ohio, and board member of the Future of Research. Christin is also a former model and has refractory epilepsy. Get ready to hear about when Christin had, Christin had a tonic-clonic seizure in a public place, and those around her thought that she was doing yoga. I am not kidding.
Christin, please tell us about yourself. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tori. I'm Christin. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Cincinnati in Cincinnati, Ohio. I study the mechanisms of epilepsy in rodent models here for my dissertation. And I'm also a patient with epilepsy. I've had epilepsy my entire life, and I still live with it to this day. Some days I have seizures and other days I don't, but, getting by, and I'm trying to complete my Ph.D. While I'm doing that. So
how on earth do you manage that? Because it sounds like, and we've spoken before about the seizures, you have refractory epilepsy, right? So you're on these drugs, anti-seizure meds, you're still having seizures, and you're studying, and you're working. How on earth does that happen?
Yeah, I have seizures. I know we've actually had to reschedule this session a couple times because I've had seizures and I wasn't up to par to participate. Mm-hmm. But it's difficult, but I take it day by day. I have good days, and on those good days, I do my dissertation work. On bad days, I try to take it easy and, do self-care, mental health, all of that stuff. And I think that's just something you have to accept and navigate through when you have epilepsy, because you really don't want to overdo it on bad days, because then you'll have more bad days, and you just want to try to figure it out as you go. But that's something I've learned, actually, having a high stress job and then having epilepsy at the same time. I used to try to push through, overdo everything, work hard on days that I had seizures. And it's, at the end of the day, what I've learned is it's just, you don't want to do that, because then you get more seizures and, then you can't do your work.
And it's not only the seizures, right? It's you feel awful in yourself, and inside that, because I've been through this too, then you blame yourself, well, the seizure was my fault because I did this, but then I have to live up to these societal expectations and I must do this, this and this. And I think you get to a point, correct me if I'm wrong, but just I kind of need to accept that I have to say no to things, and it's about quality of life rather than quantity of things that you do, right?
Right, that's exactly right, Tori. And I know for me and you, that's difficult to do because we are very involved in advocacy, and we just want to take over the world and do things all the time. So
who says we aren't, darling? Yeah.
Yeah, but eventually you have to realize it's okay to say no to things. It's okay, and I don't like to do that, but for the sake of my health, sometimes I have to learn to say no to things, or maybe I could do this, but my deadline is going to be a little different than it usually would, so I have time to figure everything out. And if I have a seizure, or if something else happens, then I'd have wiggle room to complete that task or deliverable.
And I think it's also not about Oh, I think I've had an aura seizure, so I think, if I don't step back, that may progress into a more severe seizure. It's almost like I know myself, I am basically encouraging a seizure to come if I don't step back and chill. Say, have a bath or with candles, or if that's safe for one, of course, and you're being watched and you've got people, because that's completely another topic. We do know that some people lose their lives as a result of having seizures in the bath. So, but whatever is safe and whatever works, helps you chill. Like my baby plants, I love, although some of them have grown so big now, I've had to move them to another room. Oh my goodness. But I give them love. And they love me back, and they don't talk back to me, so that's good.
That's what we need. I have my cats, and my cats provide me. They just relax me, and then I like to watch mind-numbing TV shows sometimes.
Same.
I don't know, it just calms me. And Modern Family, I like that show, or I don't know, New Girl. I don't know if you've watched these or have these in the UK, but I don't know. They're very similar to Friends, if you've heard of that.
Yeah, just a tad. Yeah, we've
tad.
we've had frenzy. You should probably call it. Yeah, from day one, I think. Yeah, I've never actually been a fan of Friends, but I'm more into the sort of the scientific-y stuff, crime, all that type of thing, and of course the classics like Shawshank Redemption, one of the best films or movies.
Seriously, the best. Shawshank Redemption is one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. And I love movies, but that one makes you laugh, cry, feel emotions that you didn't even know you had. And I love that movie. It's wonderful. It makes me cry every time. It really does.
So anyway, look, I think this is really cool. Look, we end up talking about plants, about movies, about baths and all these different things in your life. And of course your work as a scientist, but you happen to have epilepsy, and I just think that this is a great example of how diverse people affected by epilepsy can be, right?
Yeah, and I know a couple other researchers in the epilepsy research field that also have epilepsy. It's more common than you think, but we all share similar obstacles with, again, making sure we don't get overstressed or overworked. And, in academia or medicine, it's really easy to do that. But together, if we make this more open and more inclusive and make sure people know we have epilepsy, then people without epilepsy understand, hey, I know we're asking you to do this one thing and it's high stress, but you have epilepsy, so we don't want to, push you over the edge and cause you to have seizures, because if you have seizures, you can't do your work. And that's not what we want. So it's good for people to know, and that's why, I live my life I'm an open book regarding my journey with epilepsy, and that's why, I have that stance. But yeah.
Well, I love it. It's truly inspiring. It's really inspiring to hear just a bit about your story. But also, I think it's worth us saying that not everyone can achieve on paper what you do professionally and academically, and that's okay. So I would love to be doing something in a role such as you, but I just know that it's not a possibility for me, and that's really tough for me to accept personally. But I'm kind of trying to focus the limited energy that I have and efforts and passion on something which is achievable, and that I think it's a really important message that we can bring to people, no matter your level of intellect, your neurological issues, not only epilepsy, for instance, but we have lots of there's a really high rate of say cerebral palsy or whatever.
Right.
It's almost like not about your IQ or about or your physical ability. It's about seeing what you can do, what makes you feel good, and working towards that, something that's realistic as well as something that you desire.
It's very true, and everyone's advocacy story is different, but it's choosing to share that and to make what we have, epilepsy, aware to other people, because believe it or not a lot of people know what to do if you have a seizure or like what seizures are, or any of those things that seem so as basic knowledge to us. I mean, it's crazy. One time I had this strange story of I was at this meeting, and I get auras, which are kind of like warning signs, but warning signs that a seizure is coming on.
Although they are seizures as well, aren't they? But
yeah.
Like a warning that a more severe seizure might come.
Yes, yes. And my auras are fear, so I get really scared. And I was getting this feeling, and I didn't want, at this time, I wasn't open about my epilepsy. I got scared, and I just ran to the bathroom and just waited there for a couple minutes to maybe have the seizure. Didn't come on, so I'd go back, and then I got an aura again. So I ran to the bathroom, and these people thought I was having like a GI issues, but no. I waited there, and then I came out again. Like, okay, we're in the clear. I was not in the clear, and I ended up having a tonic-clonic seizure in front of all of these people who had no idea I had epilepsy. And I'm like, it's the whole shebang. It's not great. I'm going into. It was like a 2-minute seizure, which was also really bad. And they didn't call the ambulance or anything. That's a whole other issue. They had no idea what epilepsy was.
Well,
they thought I was doing yoga. Like,
are you kidding me? Oh my God.
Was yoga. And it's like, I don't know what kind of yoga you're doing, but that is the opposite of what these relaxing stretches are. But I mean, that's because I didn't tell them I had epilepsy, because I didn't want to share that. And at the time I was ashamed of it, and I didn't want anyone to know, because, it wasn't always like the time we're living in now, where people are open about things. When I was growing up, people made fun of you for having epilepsy. They didn't understand it. They didn't want to be your friend. They didn't want to work with you. So I kept it on the DL, but not anymore after that, after a bunch of different things that have happened to me. And that's why it's so important to tell people I have epilepsy. This is what happens to me with, you can even have like seizure action plans when you go to like your workplace, or
it's like project management, man. Okay. If you think I'm going to have a seizure, or I've got some inkling myself, this is what we do, and because if you you know this now, right? But the more open you are about it, and the more educated you are as the person with epilepsy, the more confident you are to explain it to other people. And then when you explain it in, at least a semi-articulate, sort of knowledgeable manner, then those people are more confident in accepting what you say and behaving in the right way, although right isn't the right word, but you know what I mean, in a way that is appropriate, both medically and socially, when you do have a seizure. And that's kind of what we want.
That's exactly what we want, exactly. And, that's what we try to do. Or even in academia, I try to remind scientists, clinicians alike, to make sure that you know how to explain your research at a level that everyone can understand. And believe it or not, people don't really think about that sometimes. And we have, as an advocate and a person with epilepsy, I like to remind people to do that, because what's the use of research and all these cool things we discover if we can't tell people about them and help the patient's population and the caregivers and everyone affected by epilepsy? So that's another way, you can advocate. If anyone here is listening that's in academia, you could remind people to explain their very complicated research that sometimes I don't even understand, and I have to read through multiple times. I mean, I can't imagine you having no academic background and reading through these really cool findings. I mean, you got to do that as well. So if anyone's listening in academia, make sure you know how to do that, so that when patients reach out to you, or you're on social media or whatever, make sure you know how to explain it to them. And also, don't get frustrated if people don't understand. It's your job to explain this important work to people. So,
as a fellow person with epilepsy, I had no idea of all the research that was going on behind the scenes until a few years ago. And I'm kind of, first of all, made me angry. Like, wow, that would have really helped me if I'd have known that the the different types of epilepsies and all the palaver that goes with it, that we are not forgotten, and there is work being done. But most people just have no idea. They don't know that they're not forgotten. They don't know that there is money being invested in, hopefully, to better their lives in the future. Not enough, that's another story. But, and it's a completely, utterly different language that is used. It reminds me, seriously, of attempting to learn French at school. And and especially for the people with epilepsy, we often have memory issues, right? So you try and learn this new word, and it's like, dude, I really can't remember. I think I recognise the letters in that word, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah, I completely relate to that. To this day, I struggle with memory problems, and it actually happened in my second year of grad school in 2017. I had a very severe medical emergency. I went into status epilepticus.
Oh gosh.
And I think everyone listening to this podcast knows what that is, but it's basically...
Just in case, tell people,
You go into this constant seizure state, and you don't return to normal consciousness. And, again, if, you're having this seizure lasting more than, I think, like 3 to 5 minutes, you want to call an ambulance immediately.
It doesn't have to be a tonic-clonic seizure that lasts 5 minutes or more. It could be another type of seizure that lasts 5 minutes or more. And in addition to that, you could have, say, a focal seizure that lasts a minute or 30 seconds, but you don't recover properly. And then you have another focal seizure or another type of seizure, and then you come out of that seizure but go into another one with like a couple of minutes in between. That is also status epilepticus if it goes on longer than 5 minutes, and it's absolutely crucial that an ambulance is called because that is dangerous territory.
It's bad. That's not exactly what happened to me, but I was in this seizure state a very long time, status epilepticus, and it didn't come out for a couple days. And they rescued me by putting me into this medication coma. And then when I woke up from it, I was told that they didn't expect me to wake up from it. So it changed everything about the trajectory of advocacy for me and how important it is and how privileged I felt to come out of that. Because people sometimes don't do that. And I'm good enough. I could function enough to still do what I do, but the only difference that I had before that status epilepticus episode and after is I have a really difficult time remembering things. And of course, this is sometimes a problem since my job is to remember. My job is to remember things and research and what I did and stuff like that. So I have to furiously write everything down and have my computer available to me to reference everything. But it's hard because, you see other academics and they could just go into their brain library and just pull that piece of information out. And
You get so envious, right? And admire them, but then you're like, so unfair. And it is unfair, but that's how it is.
I do, but it's, I felt bad about that because I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough for this. And, I'm not smart enough. But, it's not true. I went through that and now I have to live with this type of cognitive impairment. But you just have to do the best you can. And I had this one clinician tell me that, I shouldn't feel bad about that, because there's all these things I can use and they're not a crutch. I should be able to use my computer. Sometimes during presentations, if I can't remember something, I just quickly look at it. I have a whole list of things that I should know, but I can't remember. And that's it. And it's okay. But it took me a little bit to accept that it was okay, if that makes sense.
It makes complete and utter sense, especially when you're not used to having that basic cognitive dysfunction, which is what it is.
It is, yeah.
You just made me think of a conversation I was having the other day with somebody about memory issues, and particularly with names. And that's really common amongst us a lot, but especially if you have, a large part of your left temporal lobe removed. And so we're just having not actually having the tissue is a little bit of an issue. And and this guy goes, Oh, don't worry, me too, all the time. I just can't remember names. I know totally how you feel. And look, he was trying to be nice. He really was. And I appreciate that. But seriously, dude, please try not to compare your memory issues with somebody who's a bit doped up on drugs and has missing brain tissue, because it's slightly different.
It's not the same.
Things are a lot better with me than they used to be, trust me. But in terms of memory, because the rest of your brain does to try and pick things up a bit, and you learn ways of attempting to remember things a bit, but often in my case with rude words, but that's another story. But yeah, it's different, and we really appreciate anybody who tries to empathise and is not non-judgmental, hugely. But it's worth just saying, you know, it can be a bit more severe, to put it politely, at times, if you are, especially if you're having uncontrolled seizures like yourself and you're taking these drugs which slow your function down, stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. I think it's quite an important message to people.
I agree, Tori, but you know, sometimes I think people don't know how to relate when they hear something like that.
Exactly.
And I think it's also our job to understand that, but correct them.
Exactly, in a nice way.
Yeah, in a nice way.
We shouldn't be judging them either, because they don't understand what it's
like.
They
want to understand. They just don't know how at first. And that's okay too. Because that goes back to advocacy. And that's why, you know, you need to be open about everything when you feel comfortable. Because again, for years, I didn't feel comfortable, and it took me a little bit to, you know, be comfortable with the fact that, you know, I have epilepsy. I don't know if this is ever going to go away. So I need to figure out, you know, how to live with it and how to not embrace it, but be empowered. And like, I have this, and now my job is to educate other people about this. So, you know, other patients with epilepsy don't have to continue to live with stigma. Because, you know, what me and Tori are doing, you know, we're trying to break that stigma eventually. So, you know, young kids or the next generation doesn't have to go what we went through with trying to navigate this very strange world of epilepsy.
Totally. And I would also say it's important that we don't forget the older generation too, who often, at least in the past, went through even greater stigma, levels of stigma sometimes, and they should, I want to encourage them to, you know, reach out to the sort of people who are open about their epilepsy, like yourself. I'm not saying about conversation necessarily, because you are so in demand, darling, but just, you know, it's not just about educating the younger people, because that is so important and it's trendy, but also there are heaps of older people with epilepsy who've been through the mill, don't have anyone to talk to, and in fact, you know, there's an increasing rate of epilepsy amongst older people as we live longer, so there's more strokes which can bring on epilepsy and stuff like that. So I think it's important that there is a place for people, the older generation, to go when they develop epilepsy.
I 100% agree with that.
I actually know somebody who developed epilepsy last year as a result of a stroke.
Really?
Yeah, because you hear about it all the time, It was a more elderly gentleman, but he's lost so much cognitive function. He's learning to speak again now. But I had, you know, friends contact me, this was on Facebook, saying, it's actually family, and saying, what do we do, Tori? They'd never known what to do, even though they knew I had epilepsy, because I didn't have seizures in front. Yeah, I know, right? So it's like, But I guess the amazing, brilliant thing is they did reach out, and they knew they could reach out to me, and I'll just be blunt as anything, say, oh gosh, that's a bit rude word, right? Let's, you know, tell me a bit more. And however, gosh, I'm ranting here, aren't I? What is absolutely crucial, and no doubt you'll agree, is don't expect people like you and I to be epileptologists or neurologists, unless of course we are medically trained in like that. But we are not here to provide advice on medication, on treatments, on you know, what you an individual should do with your life, because it's such a complex disease.
But you know, what you're doing, Tori, is truly amazing. You're connecting all types of people that are in the epilepsy world, or patients of epilepsy, or caregivers, and it's just wonderful. I want to give you a quick shout out, like, thank you so much for doing this, and this is just a wonderful initiative, and I I just want to make sure you know that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I need to get better at taking compliments, but thank you very much. That's really. But do you know what? Honestly, from my perspective, this is so cool. It's fun. I get to speak to people like you. We never would. I mean, okay, there is not much that can, receive a gold star when it comes to epilepsy, but we would never have met had we not been talking about it. And you, you're kindly saying, you're an inspiring person. And I think that's one great thing about the internet now is that, God, that makes me sound like I'm stuck in the Stone Age. So one great thing about the internet now, but anyway, is that, but we are meeting people from random places. It's like, dude, I've never even been to, flipping, I don't know, like that part of Zanzibar or something, but I'm meeting you online, and we found that we have so much awful thing in common. But then it's like, do you know what? I'm totally bored of talking about epilepsy, darling. Can we speak about something else? Like, as we were doing before this, cool podcasts, movies, all this type of stuff. And that's also, would you agree, something really important, that we don't become defined by the epilepsy and, the mental health that goes with it?
Well, it's more, I feel like now we are friends, and I'm really thankful for that. And, friendships include other topics besides epilepsy. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, same. And to be honest, epilepsy can get a bit dull sometimes. You're like, mate, this epilepsy is like you're going on. It feels like it's knocking on the side of your skull all the time from the inside, saying, by the way, peekaboo, I'm still here. Rude word. And I'm like, dude, seriously? So it's important to be distracted by positive people like yourself, I think.
Definitely.
So, also, I think what's exceptional about you is that you've got this epilepsy, but you are like talking to us mere mortals in a way that's about science, that we can understand things. And I think it's, you were talking about the importance of this earlier, but I think it's really important, again, that people recognise how crucial that is, both clinicians, scientists, and patients. Actually, often people with epilepsy don't even know that that's a possibility. So I would love for people to be able to follow your work and see how you are actually doing this. Have you written pieces about the epilepsies in layman's terms?
I think I have. I've written a lot of pieces about science communication and how to talk to the general public and policymakers and whoever you want about your science by asking questions about, how to explain it and such. I don't know if I've written a science communication topic about epilepsy. I don't think I have. Maybe I should do that.
Wow, totally.
I don't think I have. Oh my gosh. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I read about all this other stuff.
The British Medical Journal over here does sometimes have pieces from the patient perspective, which is really important. And I do think that there must be something similar your side of the pond.
I have to put a pin in that and do a little research of my own to see.
Write a note in case you forget, yeah. Sorry, not funny, but funny,
Oh yeah, no, let me write that down. Yeah.
Can you tell me, what does the future hold for you, as far as you're aware, in terms of your research into epilepsy?
What I'm working on right now is in a field called anti-epileptogenic therapies or disease-modifying therapies. And that basically means, so like right now, me and you, Tori, we take anti-seizure medications. And those anti-seizure medications suppress the seizures from happening. If I don't take these medications, then I'm going to have seizures. Versus this field called anti-epileptogenic therapies. This means that, if we were to develop something for people with epilepsy to take, it would actually prevent them from developing epilepsy, which is completely different than suppressing seizures. So that's kind of the field that my research is in. And I'm looking at this pathway in your cells that basically has been linked to a hyper excitation of your cells, or your cells getting super excited, which then leads to seizures. And in the literature, there have been studies published where in genetic epilepsies, they give this drug called rapamycin. And what rapamycin does, it actually suppresses part of this cell pathway, which then leads to a decrease in seizures and then a decrease in pathologies related to seizures. Now, in acquired epilepsies like temporal lobe epilepsy, which is one of the most common forms of epilepsy, this has not been studied, and we don't know if this drug can work. We don't know the mechanism of action with this specific epilepsy. So my research is actually creating a model to mimic that drug and then seeing, if I knock out this part of the pathway, are seizures going to emerge? Are the pathologies going to emerge? And I study a very specific little cell population to see, what will happen if I manipulate that part. But basically, what this research is going to show us is if this cell pathway is really important in the development of temporal lobe epilepsy. And if we figure that out, then we're like, ooh, we can target this part of the brain with these specific cells. And if that happens, we could prevent the development of this type of epilepsy eventually. But a lot of basic science is just kind of exploratory, and we're trying to figure out, where to put, the help that needs to be, put there for, therapies. So it's like a whole interesting field, but I really believe that's where we're going in the future of epilepsy treatments. And that's kind of the overall goal of eventually, we want to prevent epilepsy from developing in patients, but it's difficult. But that's why, people like me or my lab, or there's a whole slew of other researchers that are doing this, but that's where we're going. And it's pretty exciting. But it's going to take time. So.
It takes time and investment and passion. Yeah, but it's going on. So people listening, whatever your background, there is work and passion going into this research, and we're hoping for positive outcomes with science. You just don't know what the outcome's going to be sometimes, and but that's what can make it exciting. And we just need to keep funding that so that, in the future, there will be more effective treatments and preventions, and who even knows the big C word at some point. And that's what we need, and which will be obviously great for patients, but families and the world.
That's the goal, one day. And I know a lot of researchers really hard at work at doing these studies, but it just, again, like Tori said, it takes time. And I know sometimes we're like, I just want to not have epilepsy anymore. But, people are working day and night on this stuff. And, the federal agencies and, whatever country you're in are funding this research, and, it's going to be okay one day. But we just have to figure out what's happening. There's a bunch of stuff happening in the brain, but sometimes we don't know how, this event A is interacting with event B, and we don't know how it's all mushing together. So.
Mushing together, my goodness. That is such a good word. That is how my brain feels at times. So everybody knows, if you haven't yet checked on epilepsysparks.com, there's a page which is solely for epilepsy research labs. So check that out, so you can learn more about the research that is going on around the world, which hopefully encourage you to know, yep, there's hope. So thank you so much for your time, Christin. It's been so lovely talking to you, and just quite frankly inspiring. And we look forward to hearing more about you and your work and looking after oneself and all of that jazz. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tori.
Thank you to Christin for chatting with us. Her openness, humour and intellect, mixed with a passion to help other people, is inspiring. To learn more about Christin, check out her profiles on Twitter and LinkedIn. Links in the description below. Next week, we shall be chatting to Dr. Colin Dunkley, both a consultant paediatrician specialising in epilepsy and the Epilepsy 12 clinical lead, based at Sherwood Forest Hospitals in the UK. Follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn or Facebook, and we'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts about today's show. Do subscribe to our podcast and know that we are always trying to improve what we are doing here for the programme. I'm Tori Robinson. Thanks for listening.